ready, folks, because a very active weather pattern is brewing as we head into Thanksgiving week, and it's followed by a major pattern shift that will unleash some cold Arctic air, cranking up our chances for winter weather across the country as we slide into early December. We're here to break down all the details. A very good Sunday morning to you. I hope you guys are having a fantastic weekend. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, and if you like what you see, smash that like button. And of course, if there's anything at all I can pray for you about, please drop it in the comments below. All right, let's get this show on the road. We'll kick things off with the Euro model, then we'll jump over to the GFS. I'm going to start our journey this Thursday afternoon, that's the 20th, and then we'll cruise right into the Thanksgiving holiday week. We've got a system developing over the middle of the country that I believe could spark some severe weather, possibly as early as Wednesday, but definitely into Thursday and Friday across the central US. So, we're looking at a 1,002 millibar low right outside the Rockies, and that's the engine driving a ton of weather across Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and places like that. Now, anytime you see this blue shade popping up on the map, that's our signal for potential snow. So, on the colder backside of this low, we could see a dusting of snow in Colorado and parts of Nebraska. But the real action we have to watch is the threat for severe weather in this zone of green, yellow, and red, just south of the low where all that warm, moist air is getting pulled in. Now, as we push into this Friday and the upcoming weekend, this system is expected to track north into Canada, likely bringing a good old-fashioned rainstorm to the northeast. I know you all have been seeing plenty of snow this past weekend, especially across New England, but this round looks to be all liquid. I'm pretty confident that next weekend is shaping up to be more of a rainstorm, but as we look ahead to a week from today, that's next Sunday, November the 23rd, my apologies, a lot of you will be off for Thanksgiving week. You'll be hitting the road, going from point A to point B, heading to grandma's house or wherever your travels take you. I really think we need to be on the lookout for one, maybe two, high-impact storm systems. My eyes are on a system down here in the deep south and the south-central US, which is what we call cutoff energy. It's basically a low-pressure system that's been cut off from the main jet stream and is kind of trapped by a ridge. Most of our frigid air is bottled up to the north, but we do have another low tracking across the northern Rockies. So, if you live out there, I'm actually more confident about significant weather out west than anywhere else. More confident about some wild weather there than anywhere else in the country. But as we move into, say, Tuesday evening, we could see a storm system spin up across the eastern US. A lot of areas could really use the rain, for example. Where I live in central South Carolina, we haven't seen a drop all month. But as we continue on toward Thanksgiving Eve, November the 26th, I think we're going to see a full-on battleground of air masses right in the heart of the country. We've got a 1,008 millibar low, and the big question is, could this become some sort of winter storm? It's very possible, but the model guidance is all over the map on this one. But as we get right into Thanksgiving Day, the Euro model keeps most of the country pretty quiet, with the system just moving into the Pacific Northwest. The real question for that whole Thanksgiving week remains, are we going to see a couple of high-impact storms? My gut says yes, we're going to see at least one. But the latest run from the Euro didn't show a whole lot. It hints at more weather moving in during the last week of November, but the eastern US looks pretty quiet for now. Okay, so it looks like a system is just scooting along a zonal flow with that Arctic air boundary staying well to the north. You've got the cold to the north and the warm to the south. So does that cold air finally get unleashed? So, that's the Euro's take. Now, what about the GFS model? It's telling a definitely different story, starting this Thursday morning, the 20th. We've got to keep a close eye on this storm system later in the work week. I think this could bring some chances for severe weather. Are all the overlapping ingredients going to be there for a big event? I'm not totally sure, but I do think we at least have a shot. A major severe weather outbreak? I highly doubt that. But some rain will move across the northeast, just like the Euro is showing, so there is some model agreement there for this upcoming weekend. It's showing maybe a shot of Arctic air, and the GFS, it loves to be more aggressive with this cold air. But it definitely moves it in and really just smacks the Great Lakes region and the Northeast, much like it's already been doing. And then, as we get into Tuesday, November the 25th, a 998 millibar low pops right off the Rockies with a lot of snow across the Rockies and lower elevation rain. Then this system really starts to deepen and we could get a kind of 1-2 punch. We've got a lot of snow across the Rockies, and we've got snow spreading across the Dakotas and northern Minnesota. So, I know what you might be saying. Well, this is just where this kind of stuff happens this time of year, and I would totally agree with you, but the GFS is showing a scenario that I think is very possible. I don't think it's completely off its rocker here, which, let's be honest, we know the GFS can be sometimes, but it shows a 997 millibar low on Thanksgiving Eve evening, tracking right across the middle of the country, and I think this is an absolutely realistic scenario. There's going to be a battle of air masses, and I mean, just look at this potential snowstorm breaking out across the central and northern high plains, including places like Denver. And then we've got a ton of rain on the warmer side of this, which could mean severe weather. Then we get into Thanksgiving morning and afternoon, and it has a 996 millibar low, and down here where you see the greens, yellows, and orange. That could very well be a severe weather setup. I know it's past 10 days out, but this is right on Thanksgiving Day. This right here could potentially be a blizzard if things play out this way. Colder air would follow, and then rain would move across the eastern US. But again, it's pretty far out. We're all the way into the last week of November now, and the colder air actually tries to catch up with some of this moisture, potentially turning some of that rain to snow. And then, what happens after that? Who knows? It's anybody's call. But the one thing we're pretty confident about is that there's going to be a lot of moisture right across the middle of the country and eventually into areas of the eastern US, especially for you folks in the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the western Deep South and Mid-South. You see these areas right here? I mean, this is where we could get multiple inches of rain. And this will most likely be all rain except for maybe when you get onto the northwestern fringe of this precipitation shield. Out west, of course, we could get some higher elevation snow and things like that. But you know, speaking of snow, this is the potential snow between now and the next 10 days. It's not an exact forecast. It's the Euro Ensemble, one of the best tools you can look at, and it shows the possibility of higher elevation snow. So, you know what that means these ski resorts are going to be. Finally starting to rack it in a little bit. But the Sierra Nevada will get a lot of snow in just the next 72 hours, so winter is definitely on the way. Now, for the central US, this is where I kind of want to show you something. This is between now and about Tuesday, November the 25th. It shows a little signal for snow up here, but not much. I want you to watch how this gap kind of fills in here after we start moving past Thanksgiving Day and into the last week of November. See how everything begins to close in? I think that fits with what we're seeing. That cold air will start to kind of flirt with this region, and then some of these storm systems could begin to have a little more winter weather with them. So there's a signal, kind of between day 10 and day 15, that increases the snow potential across the northern section of the country. But look at this tight battleground of nothing versus something as far as the winter weather category goes here. But I do think, a couple of key areas around the Thanksgiving timeframe I want to watch out for are the front range and the northern and central high plains. I think that's an area to watch for some potential winter weather right around Thanksgiving time. My in-laws are actually heading out to Denver to visit my brother-in-law around Thanksgiving, so they might get to see some snow. Not gonna lie, I'm a little jealous. But anyway, this totally backs up what we're seeing on the models. This is from the Climate Prediction Center, showing the risk of heavy snow. You're at a slight risk in this area right here, between the 23rd and the 29th, that's almost a full week, and then again between the 26th and the 29th. Which, you guessed it, covers Thanksgiving and stretches out into the northern high plains and the Midwest. So, this confirms exactly what we just talked about. Now, as for the precipitation outlook, if you're in the green, you've got an above average chance to see some action. And by action, I mean precipitation. We're looking at a better than not chance to see something falling, whether that's rain or snow. Out here, the farther west you go, it's definitely leaning more towards the snow category. It all depends on your elevation. Now, for the middle of the country and the eastern US, you definitely have a chance to see above average precipitation in this zone. And if we look at the 8 to 14 day outlook, the middle of the country is really lighting up. It's looking like we're going to get some storm systems, folks. We've got a chance for above average precipitation, especially once we get into that dark green. That's a higher chance. I mean, we're getting into that 50, 60, even 70% chance for more moisture than usual during this time frame. This lines up with everything we've been saying. Now, what about the temperature part of the equation? Let's break this down starting this coming Friday. I mean, it's probably going to get into the 70s and 80s across the South over the next several days. A pocket of cool air across the Southwest will kick things off on Friday, November 21st. Meanwhile, warm air continues to dominate the middle of the country. As we push into Monday of next week, about 8 days from now, most of the country is still feeling warm. It's showing maybe a shot of Arctic air, and the GFS, it loves to be more aggressive with this cold air. But it definitely moves it in and really just smacks the Great Lakes region and the Northeast, much like it's already been doing. And then, as we get into Tuesday, November the 25th, a 998 millibar low pops right off the Rockies with a lot of around 50, maybe 48 degrees if the forecast is calling for 10 to 12 degrees below average. But for most of the central and eastern US, it's still warmer than normal. However, a battleground is developing on the Euro ensemble. You can see it right there. So the big question is, how far eastward does this cold air ooze and take over? We'll talk more on that in just a second, but the main takeaway for Thanksgiving week is this. The east is going to be warm and the west is going to be cold, compared to your average. Okay, and the Euro ensemble model paints a slightly different picture of how quickly this cold air progresses. I'm going to switch to this and make sure we have the latest data. And as we push all the way out to Thanksgiving Eve, the 26th, but then we see a change brewing out west. See these blues and greens? That means below average temperatures. I know this can be a little confusing, but all it means is you need to know your local average for this time of year. If your average is, say, 60 degrees, then you might have highs. You can see the cold air is marching further east and quicker than on the standard Euro ensemble. Here's where the Euro ensemble has it at 300 hours, and this is where the Euro AI ensemble has it. It's definitely moving east much faster. If we go all the way to the end of the run, it's really trying to push this cold into the eastern US. And when you look at the latest GFS ensemble, it's a similar story. Let's set this in motion. At first, warm air has a grip on pretty much the entire lower 48, and then things start to change as we get. The eastern half of the lower 48 is chilly, while the west has some serious cold air moving in. Those green colors mean we're talking 10 to 15 degrees below average. Then we start to make our way to that 300-hour time frame, all the way out to Black Friday, Friday the 28th. Things get a bit more widespread. It looks like most of the country begins to cool off, and this is backed up by the 6 to 10-day temperature outlook from the 21st through the 25th. In the days leading up to Thanksgiving, most of the country, into Thanksgiving week, some cold air starts to pop up out west, and then as we get closer to the holiday, there's that battleground of temperatures right across the middle of the country. So what happens as we push deeper into the forecast all the way to the last day or two of November? If we go all the way to the end of the run, it's really trying to push this cold into the eastern US. And when you look at the latest GFS ensemble, it's a similar story. Let's set this in motion. At first, warm air has a grip on pretty much the entire lower 48, and then things start to change as we get. They're all over the place. Some show a cold front sweeping across in the last couple days of November, and some don't. So there are still a lot of question marks with this. But listen, everything we've just discussed is backed up by this graphic from the Climate Prediction Center, hinting at a significant pattern change, is leaning towards above average temperatures except for the southwest. But look at the southeast. You all are going to be well above average, which is right where I live. The 8 to 14-day temperature outlook runs right through the Thanksgiving period. They're all over the place. Some show a cold front sweeping across in the last couple days of November, and some don't. So there are still a lot of question marks with this. But listen, everything we've just discussed is backed up by this graphic from the Climate Prediction Center, hinting at a significant pattern change, is leaning towards above average temperatures except for the southwest. But look at the southeast. You all are going to be well above average, which is right where I live. The 8 to 14-day temperature outlook runs right through the Thanksgiving period. Things get a bit more widespread. It looks like most of the country begins to cool off, and this is backed up by the 6 to 10-day temperature outlook from the 21st through the 25th. In the days leading up to Thanksgiving, most of the country, it's looking increasingly likely across much of the country, and we're really focusing on that period from the 22nd of November through the 1st of December. We're also about to discuss what happens from December 1st to around the 12th of December for the second half of this update. Things get a bit more widespread. It looks like most of the country begins to cool off, and this is backed up by the 6 to 10-day temperature outlook from the 21st through the 25th. In the days leading up to Thanksgiving, most of the country, that's a few degrees above average. So, let's get a little technical and look at what the 500 millibar pattern is doing at this point. But you can read it right here. One thing I want to highlight is the potential for a rare November sudden stratospheric warming event, which may usher in a significant pattern change later this month and into early December. We're about to break that down. So, in the week leading up to and including Thanksgiving, a colder pattern is likely for the west while milder air overspreads the east. It's one of those sudden stratospheric warming events. Basically, think of it as a huge temperature spike in the upper atmosphere right over the Arctic, happening in a really short amount of time. So, when the Arctic warms up like that, it dislodges all that frigid air and shoves it south. The big question is, where does it go? Does it head for Europe, or does it head for us? So, what's giving us this look? This blue area is what we call a trough. It drags down cold air and normally brings storminess with it, whether that's a winter storm, severe weather, or a combination of both. Okay, and then you see these other colors in here, the yellows, the oranges, things like that. So, pretty much December 1st. This is where the cold air stops, right in here. It's just starting to seep into the middle of the country and sneak into areas of the eastern US. The blues are below average temperatures, and the warmer colors, like the orange and so on. So, pretty much December 1st. This is where the cold air stops, right in here. It's just starting to seep into the middle of the country and sneak into areas of the eastern US. The blues are below average temperatures, and the warmer colors, like the orange and so on, this represents slightly below to well below average temperatures on the move. And this makes perfect sense. See the below average temperatures across the middle of the country and the northern tier? Remember what I just showed you? If we jump back and we're all over the place with these maps, if we go back to this view, right? So check this out. We have a shot of super cold air plunging down from the Arctic right into this dip in the jet stream. That means we've got an active storm track brewing, and we need to break that down. Meanwhile, this ridge of high pressure over here, it's just going to keep pumping in that warm air, setting the stage for a major temperature battle. It's one of those sudden stratospheric warming events. Basically, think of it as a huge temperature spike in the upper atmosphere right over the Arctic, happening in a really short amount of time. So, when the Arctic warms up like that, it dislodges all that frigid air and shoves it south. The big question is, where does it go? Does it head for Europe, or does it head for us? But looking at this, I really think this event will peak right around Thanksgiving, and it's going to send a blast of cold air right down into the lower 48. Where exactly will it hit? Which side of the globe gets the deep freeze? We're feeling pretty confident we're going to get our act together on this one. This cold air is spilling down into the lower 48. So, how does the pattern evolve from there? You see, this map backs up this one, which in turn supports this one. Let's start here and push the forecast through the early part of December. Alright, so that's the setup. Now, let's pick up right where we left off and dive into the forecast. We have to start here, right? Okay, so this is taking us into the very first day of December. And I know, it's the Euro weekly model. It's one of those sudden stratospheric warming events. Basically, think of it as a huge temperature spike in the upper atmosphere right over the Arctic, happening in a really short amount of time. So, when the Arctic warms up like that, it dislodges all that frigid air and shoves it south. The big question is, where does it go? Does it head for Europe, or does it head for us? Now we're seeing a bit of a ridge starting to pop up over here, and the trough is digging more across the central to eastern US. It's not taking a super deep dive, but it's definitely digging in, allowing colder air to rush into this area and maybe even shift further east. Okay, and as we push even further ahead in time, all the way to the middle of the month, this setup would absolutely support a stormier pattern for the eastern US with plenty of colder air to go with it. But how far south does that cold air make it? Alright, so that's the setup. Now, let's pick up right where we left off and dive into the forecast. We have to start here, right? Okay, so this is taking us into the very first day of December, and I know, it's the Euro weekly model. It's one of those sudden stratospheric warming events. Basically, think of it as a huge temperature spike in the upper atmosphere right over the Arctic, happening in a really short amount of time. So, when the Arctic warms up like that, it dislodges all that frigid air and shoves it south. The big question is, where does it go? Does it head for Europe, or does it head for us? That, my friends, is a massive trough. And it looks like it's going to stay anchored over the central and eastern US, bringing in colder air and a stormier pattern. But we still have this stubborn ridge hanging out right here. So what happens as we move forward? Oh, and I have to show you this too. This right here confirms everything we're seeing. What we're looking at is a major warming event way up in the Arctic region. So as we get about 5 days into December, this giant bowl of a trough sitting over Canada and the northern US, the north central US, the eastern upper peninsula is just going to get this consistent lake effect snow banding feature.